Once reborn, she chose Xiaofu Ji'an, but she didn't want her world to collapse from her choices. My mother is seriously ill, and my father is unconscious. Driven deep into the mountains by the tribe. I have to save my father and work hard for the livelihood of my family of 3. She was immersed in the quagmire, observing the suffering of women everywhere. Even women know how to pick and bully women. This world everyone is teaching girls how to sacrifice their individuality and become virtuous wives, mothers, and assistants. Women's scriptures and rings tell them what they can and cannot do. But no one taught them how to be human. In poverty, women are the first to be exploited. When framing became her nourishment, framing became her support, and she returned to Beijing once. She's just going to turn this world upside down. She waved the flag and shouted. Since when did those good articles, fighting against enemies and helping the people, never bring back the image of women in our minds? How much is it that others take credit for it? And the woman, forever trapped by the word deep boudoir, has a deaf and mute body, ears and mouth. Why can a woman's excellence only become a bargaining chip? Why should women be gentle and charming, and why should women not have attacking power? To listen to politics with a hanging curtain. A hanging curtain. Why do we need to hang curtains? Speaking, Yan Rujin pulled off the pearl curtain blocking her face. Immediately, I ascend to the throne. Keywords of the novel. Your Majesty, the Empress ascends to the throne. No pop-ups, Your Majesty, the Empress has ascended to the throne. Download the complete TXT collection, Your Majesty, the Empress has ascended the throne. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Station. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Station. Ji'an state. During spring and autumn period at night, the strong wind swept through the valley with goose feathers and heavy snow, as if thousands of unjust ghosts were crying. The Chongjunling station, standing on the mountainside fortress, is now brightly lit. Yan Rujin and her mother, dressed in snow and ice, arrived with difficulty. Knocking. Knocking. The sound of knocking on the door, almost obscured by the wind, immediately drew a tense expression from everyone in the post station, and the cold knife unsheathed. Uncle Lu, I'm Ji'an. My mother and I are here to pick up my father. The faint and cautious childish female voice did not make the indoor atmosphere any more relaxed. The leader sat a young master wearing a snow fox cloak and with a pale complexion. With a dangerous squint in his eyes, he said, "Open the door." The kneeling guard trembled with fear upon hearing this and quickly got up to open the door. But without realizing it, he stumbled to the door. Yan Rujin's frail body withstood the fierce storm and snow, suddenly feeling her body sink. Taking advantage of the situation, I saw my mother fainting at her feet. We don't want her to react yet, Ji. The door of the post station only opened a pitiful small crack. Yan Rujin was covered in wind, snow, and ice, so anxious that she lifted her stiff little hand and pulled off the scarf from her face, revealing her mouth and nose that were frozen red and purple. Just as I was about to speak, I saw Uncle Lu, who had always been calm, impatiently scolding her. Ji'an. Why are you here at this time? Hurry up and leave. As she spoke, she pushed her to close the door. Yan Rujin's heart thumped. Nowadays, in the middle of the night, the snow ravages the wind and the gluttons. They finally arrived here, and her mother suddenly fainted. Going back is a death, staying outside this post station is also a death. Yan Rujin quickly inserted her arm into the crack of the door, trying to stop it from closing. Coincidentally, Lu Er, the panicked courier, closed the door and squeezed him. Ah! This scream frightened Lu Er's face and he quickly opened the door. As soon as I opened the door, there was a muffled sound as I collapsed on the threshold. Yan Rujin held her unbearable pain in her left arm and quickly knelt down when she saw the situation. Uncle Lu, for the sake of my mother often helping your family, please help us. As she spoke, tears welled up from her eyes and broke through the ice and snow on her face. Lu Erming hesitated and kept winking at Yan Rujin. At this moment, she was already aware that there was definitely a problem with this post station. But her mother is already unconscious, so it's better to take a fight in this snowy and gluttonous wilderness. Lu Er looked at the weather outside, the wind and snow blowing straight into his eyes, and then instinctively turned his head to look behind him. There is a raging storm and snow outside, but inside. It can really be considered a jackal, wolf, tiger, and leopard, and I feel very helpless. In the end, she could only join hands with Yan Rujin and drag her mother into the room, quickly closing the door tightly. Truly warm, Yan Rujin instinctively sighed in her heart. It's not even time to get rid of the thick ice and snow on my body. Lu Er's uncontrollable nervousness and worries fell into Yan Rujin's eyes. Jin, kowtow to the official quickly. Lu Er quickly pulled Yan Rujin over and greeted her while saying. Yan Rujin quickly watched Lu Er's kowtow carefully and followed suit. With a grateful expression on his face, he said, "Thank you very much, sir." "Thank you very much, sir." Saying many things is wrong, she must remember that she is a 12-year-old child who has never been out of the mountains. She is no longer the towering Empress Dowager with a hanging curtain in her past life. "Lift your head." A faint yet murderous voice rang out. Yan Rujin's body felt as if it had been electrified, and there was a hint of familiarity in her voice. Trembling, she lowered her eyes and looked up, her long eyelashes stained with frost, perfectly concealing her gaze. Taking advantage of the situation, she carefully scrutinized inside the post station. "In front of me, there are 4 immortal tables arranged in pairs, and behind one table in the southeast corner, there is a man who has just spoken. Wearing a snow fox cloak, his face was sickly and pale. Behind him stood 2 black-clad guards of his age, one on the left and the other on the right. At the other tables sat 3, 8, and 20.4 black-clad guards. However, looking at the level of these 20.4 people, they are not as high as the 2 black-clad guards standing upright. The 2 young guards were both adorned with golden waist tags. Gold medal. Even ordinary officials and noble families in the capital dare not use gold as a waist token for their guards. It could only be people from the palace. Upon closer inspection of her pale face, Yan Rujin felt familiar, but what's your name? With a cold voice, Yan Rujin's thoughts were interrupted, and she was not allowed to answer. She continued to press forward step by step. The blizzard is raging, and you are thin in stature. How did you bring your mother here? The cold tone was so calm and powerless. Yan Rujin knew that as long as her answer was not as good as this young master's intention. Anyone here can leave her alone. A sudden sourness hit the nose in an instant. Yan Rujin hurriedly grabbed the ground with her head and said, "On the way here, my mother suddenly had a high fever and had to endure it to come here. I beg for your mercy to save me." Before she could finish speaking, the sickly young master interrupted directly. "Oh, what's with me?" His voice became even colder as he spoke. "Think about how to save your little life first." The cold rejection and threat made Yan Rujin's heart half cold. The closest guard to Yan Rujin had already drawn his long sword and pressed it directly against her neck. Lu Er wanted to speak up and approach, with a long sword piercing his Adam's apple. The sickly young master, with interested eyes, looked coldly at Yan Rujin without emotion. "Say." Before he could finish speaking, Yan Rujin trembled like a sieve of bran all over her body and quickly spoke out, "My daughter's surname is Yan Rujin, and there are still a few days left until December 13th this year." "You just said. What's your name?" The dangerous aura had enveloped Yan Rujin layer by layer, and an unprecedented fear left her unsure of what to say. I could only close my eyes and cry out with fear and trembling. "My daughter's name is Yan Rujin. This afternoon, my second uncle delivered a message to my father Yan Nan, who came to the post station to pick me up. As soon as she arrived at the door, my daughter's mother passed out." Lu Er was clearly a bit anxious as he listened. I didn't want the guard to immediately press his sword against his flesh, which scared him and made him quickly shrink his neck and tremble. Yan Rujin was all confused. For some unknown reason, the person's lips clearly played with a playful smile, which instantly flashed in Yan Rujin's mind. This smile resembles him, but his figure is far from it. Ha, are you Yan Rujin? The person was clearly struggling with physical strength, but with a face full of contempt and disdain, he mockingly approached Yan Rujin and stood tall. How despicable a woman like you has refused our court officials recognition from Xiangshu. As he spoke, he slowly squatted down and said, do you know how many daughters in this world would love to enter the He family in Haojing and become slaves? Looking at his colorless face, coupled with those seemingly melancholic eyes, he still couldn't conceal his high nose bridge, his sharp mouth that seemed to be showing off with blood. Yan Rujin suddenly gave him a nod and said, how dare you come to your land with such a low life? The common woman dare not think about it. As he spoke, he didn't forget to add, I hope the official can have mercy on the poor women. I haven't finished speaking. Despite being a frail and sickly young master, he immediately stood up and threw his cloak, hitting Yan Rujin's face without hesitation. Yan Nanjing arrived here at least half a month ago. Why did you only come to pick him up today? Yan Rujin was shocked upon hearing this and glanced at Uncle Lu beside her. He carefully nodded as he looked at the sword in his throat, and Yan Rujin was completely confused. Why is it today? End of this chapter. Chapter 2 was originally Old Friends. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 was originally Old Friends. The sick young master is very satisfied with Yan Rujin's current expression. He sneered as if playing with the palm of his hand and said, He Wang came to recognize his family, and you kicked them out. Proud. This night, he found another excuse and worked tirelessly to find it. With a pause, his eyes were filled with disgust and he said, but really, it's like standing up again and again. Yan Rujin swore to the sky that she really didn't know these things. She was also curious why everything was squeezed on this day. Early in the morning, her mother's second sister came to recognize her, and she would not go to Haojing to marry her like in her previous life. Just as I saw off Lady He, Wang Peixian, my second uncle told me that his father Yan Nan was fighting at the post station and urged me to go and pick him up quickly. There are 3 carriages in Jiayuan. But then my grandmother took her with her, and several cousins from the family returned to their mother's house, using all the carriages. Uncle Air was urging urgently, and several aunts were shouting and cursing, urging the 2 of them to go pick up someone before walking to the post station. But unexpectedly, my weak mother began to have a high fever on the way, and she persevered until she fainted in front of the station door. Unfortunately, you have such good calculations. The weak young master had no intention of letting Yan Rujin go. With a look that only came to mind, he said, look at my memory. How did you forget about Yan Nanjing's involvement in the rebellion? As she spoke, she bent down and examined Yan Rujin's face, covered in mud, dirt, and ice. Cruel said, I don't know if your 9 tribes have enough heads to chop. After speaking, he stood up and stared intently at Yan Rujin, watching her tremble like a frightened chick. The smile that was originally hanging on her face gradually faded, as if to make a hole in her. Threat. But what exactly does this threat mean? Is he associated with the He family? Yan Rujin's heart suddenly froze, tears mixed with mud and snow spreading on her face. She looked helplessly at Uncle Lu beside her. Rebellion. Chop your head. This. As she spoke, Yan Rujin shook her head and started speaking incoherently, then burst into tears uncontrollably. Even Lu Er on the side panicked. Even if the long sword was pressed against his neck, he still wanted to speak. Official, is there a misunderstanding? Brother Yan. Yan Nanjing was carefully sent by the people in the palace. Upon hearing these words, Yan Rujin had a bad premonition in her heart. It was sent by the people in the palace, and it took half a month for my second uncle to inform me to pick him up. And since she entered the house, there was not even a basic 3-person guard here except for Uncle Lu as a post guard. More importantly, where is her father? What's wrong with her father? The young master with sickly features, a pair of eagle-like eyes, stared fixedly at Yan Rujin. Watching her cry and kowtow, she instinctively hugged her cloak. I'm afraid she might dirty his snow fox cloak. Listening to her crying, her rough voice and vulgar behavior made him increasingly unhappy. Looking at her without any fear of the long sword in front of her, she lifted her arm and wiped away the runny nose and tears from her face. With this touch, it finally made people see that under the mud and snow, she was wearing an ochre brocade long jacket. Judging by the color and pattern, it looked more like she was only worn by elders in the family. The collar and cuffs are covered with blue coarse cotton lining, and there are faint cotton fluff floating out of the edge lining. In theory, Yannan controversy is led by Generals Wu Wei, and even worse, there are hundreds of acres of fertile land allocated by the court. How could her daughter dress so shabby? His face was covered in mud, making it hard to tell his appearance. Damn it, those black and sparkling eyes were like 2 dark pearls hidden behind the shimmering water vapor, making him look so disgusted. A person as humble and dirty as she is, there is no reason to refuse the extravagant wealth and status of the He family. And now the cloak and snow are coming. Has she already received the secret letter, wanting to blackmail him? The more she was like this, the more it made him angry. Hasty breath attacks the heart. Cough, cough. He is aware of his health and has always restrained himself. But at this moment the fierce cough immediately drew all the guards around. Just now, pointing a long sword at Lu Er's person, he hurriedly said, "Hurry up and find the divine doctor." At this moment, Lu Er hurriedly climbed towards Yan Rujin's side. First, I probed her mother's breathing and breathed a sigh of relief when I saw that it was relatively stable. Seeing Yan Rujin about to speak, she couldn't help but frown and stare at her, lowering her voice and saying, "Don't talk." After speaking, he murmured softly, "I don't want you to be taken away from me." Yan Rujin looked at Lu Er's desire and hesitated, clearly knowing something. Just as Lu Er was about to speak, he noticed someone looking at them and quickly lowered her head. At this moment, a familiar fragrance spread to the nostrils, and the gentle voice of a yellow warbler instantly pierced through Yan Rujin's entire soul. He Yanlan. I got in touch, no wonder she was said to be both arrogant and upright. It seems that there is definitely a lot of credit from He Yanlan in this. But why is she here? Brother Buan. Buan. Xia Buan. Thank you. The 7th prince, what a narrow path for enemies. Strange, what's wrong with him at this moment? Unfortunately, she will not be given time to recall, as the owner of the voice has already come to her face. He Yanlan, who had an outstanding appearance, was 15 or 16 years old, comparable to Xia Buan's age. Her appearance and attire were already stunning. Wearing a lotus-colored water green embroidered gold waistband jacket and skirt, the patterns on it are even more used, and only the pheasant and pheasant can be used by aristocratic families. Yan Rujin could clearly see that although it was a pheasant pattern, its tail feathers were faintly imitating those of a phoenix. Because of her arrival, the guards around her quickly and automatically stepped aside, and because of this, the position where her mother lay hindered them. The guard who originally pointed his sword at Lu Er glanced at Yan Rujin and then said coldly to Lu Er, "Hurry up and take the person away." Lu Er quickly greeted Yan Rujin and dragged her mother to the backyard of the post station. As soon as I opened the door, the snow and wind enveloped me in a luxurious fragrance and penetrated my nostrils. Yan Rujin looked at the yard full of good horses and couldn't help but rub her nose. In the end, her gaze fell on the 3 golden drawn carriages emitting fragrance in the wind and snow. Her eyes shrank imperceptibly. Regardless of past or present life, her things will always be so exquisite. Don't worry, your mother must have been frozen. There's an old stove in the firewood room that's just starting to burn. Remember to rub your mother's hands and feet, and I'll go get you some snow. She's frozen too hard, but she can't use hot water to heat her up at once. Yan Rujin quickly went to fetch ash for the old stove, and then pulled a handful of hay to prepare for ignition. She looked around but didn't see any flint. Lu Er walked in and threw the snow bumps he had brought directly into the pot, then pulled her apart. Hurry up and take care of your mother. As Lu Er spoke, he skillfully took out a torch and directly lit it to add firewood. Watching the flames ignite, a warm feeling began to emanate from Yan Rujin's heart. Yan Rujin didn't stop holding on to her hands, first laying her mother flat in the haystack. Take a wooden basin of snow prepared by Lu Er and try to rub her mother's hands and feet. As Yan Rujin watched as the snow on the stove had completely turned into water, and her mother's hands and feet gradually regained their color, she finally asked the words she had been holding in her heart for a long time. Uncle Lu, where's my father? Upon hearing this, Lu Er clearly dodged and looked at the fire on the stove. Without needing to add firewood, he picked up a small branch and put it inside. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Drive to the end. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Drive to the end. Oh, don't listen to what the superior said about the rebellion. Your father is the left guard of General Yuan, who is guarding the city in the Nanling Mountain, western Xinjiang. General Yuan is the person recommended by His Highness the Prince. How can he conspire? Yan Rujin knew that Uncle Lu was comforting her. However, if we talk about rebellion, in a previous life, General Yuan suddenly rebelled on the first day of the winter month. Today is just the second day of the winter month, and this news can only be transmitted from western Xinjiang to central Beijing in at least half a month. The closest place to the northern border is mostly mountain roads, and it will take at least a month for news to come. How did Xiaobai find out? Is it a premeditated plan? If she remembers correctly, on the 16th of September, when the royal family was hunting, the crown prince and Xiaobai were both unconscious and on the brink of death, while one was poisoned. In his past life, Xiaobai should have detoxified himself in a certain mountain due to poisoning at this time, and only appeared in the capital 5 years later. How do you drag your sick body to Chongjunling now? So, what about my dad? Yan Rujin asked after her. Obviously, Lu Er was a bit difficult to speak of and could only sigh. Wait until your mother wakes up. As he spoke, Lu Er prepared to escape. Seeing his abnormality, Yan Rujin directly blocked his way. Uncle Lu, you can tell without me. The events that happened today were all aimed at my mother's life. Especially my mother. If you dare not even tell me, how can you be sure that my mother won't be able to bear it? Lu Er never expected that in his eyes, he would always be an obedient child, and that he would just grow up like this. Glancing at Yan Rujin's mother who was still sleeping, he gestured for Yan Rujin to come out with him. Yan Rujin confirmed the firewood at the bottom of the pot. Lu Er chose all the short sycamore wood, which is just the same length as the stove. It's flammable and can't fall out. Glancing at her mother again, she lay near the door and far from the fire, feeling uneasy. She carefully cleared all the hay by the stove before following her out. As Lu Er walked a few steps, he stopped at the stable. Brother Yan is right here. Following the direction of his fingers, Yan Rujin saw a pile of dry firewood in the stable, as if there was a pile of hair. She rushed forward, but Lu Er couldn't stop him even if he wanted to. She had already rushed up and peeled away the hay. Dad! Dad! After shouting a few times without any response, Yan Rujin's tears rolled down uncontrollably. Uncle Lu, what's wrong with my father? Why did he leave him in the stable? Anyway, he has also made contributions to the court. Yan Rujin cried as she spoke. Lu Er glanced at the second floor of the post station. Since being sent over, Brother Yan has been in a coma. He was originally placed in a room on the second floor. However, there was a girl accompanying him who insisted that Brother Yen had contracted a plague and ordered him to be thrown into the stable. Lu Er looked embarrassed and self-blaming. Yen Rujin already knows who Lu Er is talking about. Suddenly, Lu Er seemed to remember something. Hurriedly, he said, "Your father was sent by the people in the palace. Before leaving, he gave him a lot of gold and silver. Some were taken away by your second uncle, while others were hidden in his arms. Please take a look quickly." Yen Rujin, who was originally extremely desperate, couldn't help but feel a surge of hope upon hearing these words. Having money makes things easier. On the way, the two of them fell into a snow pit several times, and the bag of silver money they were carrying also fell somewhere. If I had money now, I would be able to establish myself at this post station and not let Uncle Lu be in trouble. She quickly removed the weeds that covered her father's body, and found a thin indigo blue blanket. With a touch of Yen Rujin, it was still warm through the blanket. I poured a soup pot, but I dare not let anyone see me. Lu Urban was a sincere person, speaking casually. Yen Rujin listened, but her heart warmed. If the post official found out, she would have to punish Uncle Lu again. Yen Rujin tried her best to search inside and outside, but in the end, she couldn't find anything. Afraid of letting his father catch a cold again, he quickly covered it up again. Lu Er clearly saw that Yen Rujin searched for a long time but couldn't find a penny. It must be Yen Lauer who killed 1,000 swords. When he came here today, he didn't have a good heart. I'm afraid it wasn't because the post minister had already been bribed by him. Why did he just leave my Yen elder brother here? Upon hearing these words, Yen Rujin's heart became even colder, and she took away all the gold and silver rewards in the palace. Her second uncle came today and didn't bring her father back with him. You should know that her second uncle has always been high-profile, especially in other vehicles, trying to get her father to make a war horse. At that time, it was not snowing yet. Riding horses back and forth could only be as slow as an hour. Today, my grandmother has not been in contact with her mother's family for many years, so why suddenly took all the carriages with her? 3 aunts who got married, the closest one to home is also 5 miles away. Why is it so coincidental? Her mother just went out to borrow a carriage. They just stood at the door shouting and cursing. Her mother was already anxious about her father, but was scolded and forced to do nothing. She went to several places but refused to borrow a car. I was also scolded and in a hurry, I took a gamble and pulled her to pick up her father. Originally, the two of them gambled that it wouldn't snow today, but the snow was unstoppable halfway through. Thinking about it this way, everything was already premeditated. Yen Rujin closed her eyes slightly and held her father's hand with one hand. She buried her head extremely low. Looking at Lu Er as a big old man, I don't know what to do. I can only sigh helplessly and say, it's my fault for being talkative. I shouldn't have said it. Look, this is going to make your family centrifugal. Centrifuge. That's a group of hungry wolves who have no heart and still eat people without vomiting their bones. If Uncle Lu doesn't say it, how long will we be kept in the dark? Yen Rujin spoke coldly, but her childish voice made people feel pity. As he spoke, Lu Er seemed to remember something and quickly reminded Yen Rujin, by the way, Jin, you should have someone in this small room. They were discussing how to trick you into marrying someone who is going to die in Beijing. Perhaps only he Yanlan wants her to marry on her behalf, while Xie Bai, the one who should be provoked at this time, just want her to die. Not allowing her to carefully contemplate the key points, her eyes suddenly widened. I saw a nearby wooden house, with flames and thick smoke licking the dilapidated window frames. Mother. Her mother is still in the woodshed. Upon seeing it, Lu Er quickly shouted and ran towards the firewood shed, running into the water. Yen Rujin instinctively rushed straight into the fire. She clearly saw that the originally good stove had been pulled out by someone, igniting the dry firewood around her mother. If no one deliberately set fire, she wouldn't believe it no matter what. Immediately after entering the door, Lu Er watched as Yan Rujin struggled and dragged his mother. Without hesitation, she lifted her mother onto her shoulder and ran out with one hand holding Yan Rujin. Just as I ran out of the firewood shed, the entire one was completely engulfed by the fire. Watching the raging fire and then seeing that no one came out to put out the fire at the entire post station, Yan Rujin's heart sank. Lu Er was extremely anxious and said, Jin, keep an eye on your mother. I need to quickly put out the fire. Lu Er said and quickly went to a water tank in the courtyard that only 3 people could embrace. The bucket that was originally placed on one side is missing. Looking inside the tank, there is a hole at the bottom of the tank that is not even a drop of water. He went to see the well, and the bucket tied to the wheel was also missing. I wanted to go to the house to fetch a bucket, but was mercilessly stopped. Idle people are not allowed to enter. Upon hearing this, Lu Er pointed angrily at the large fire and said, Can't you see it? As soon as the words fell, the 2 guards who were originally guarding outside entered the room and closed the door tightly. Lu Er was so anxious that he could only keep banging on the door and shouting loudly, Water's running, put out the fire quickly. But no one paid attention. Yan Rujin quickly came over to take a look. The burning firewood room was located in a corner, and the reactions of these people, combined with the mysteriously missing bucket, made Yan Rujin aware that it was not an accident. It's murder. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Heart-Eye Children. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Heart-Eye Children. Walking in the water is a big deal, and this group of people is not afraid. That's right, it fits the temperament of their group very well. The people don't fight against the officials. Let's go and rest at my place first. After this snow, I'll go back to the village with you. At this moment, Lu Er had already turned red with anger. Yan Rujin quickly made a loud noise at Lu Er, saying, Thank you, Uncle Lu, for saving my mother and me. I, Yan Rujin, will definitely repay Uncle Lu in this lifetime. Upon hearing these words, Lu Er couldn't bear it anymore and quickly helped up Yan Rujin, whose face was full of tears. Good child, if it weren't for your mother's help, my family would have died 800 times. There's no need for you to say such heavy things. Even though Uncle Lu said so, Yan Rujin wiped away her tears while still firmly remembering in her heart. Not only should we take note of Lu Er's life-saving kindness, but we also need to take note of the person who killed him. She has a small heart. Uncle Lu, who did this? It seems that she is asking Lu Er, but in fact, she is asking herself, and she herself knows the answer clearly. The tears in Yan Rujin's eyes had dried up, and she looked up at a dark spot on the ridge of the roof that was covered by wind and snow. She knew that Yanlan's dark guards were like shadows, hiding there. And she also knew that he had done all of this. She looked for a long time until Lu Er called her again, and then she moved her eyes. And as she moved her eyes, a black figure emerged from the shadow behind the roof ridge. Lu Er saw Yan Rujin's melancholy and said, Your father's matter is too deep. Don't think about it for now. He has me to take care of him, and your primary task is to take care of your mother first. As soon as they finished speaking, they were about to open the door and enter the house, but they didn't expect 2 guards to block their way. Still the same sentence. No one is allowed to enter without permission. I am the guard of this post station, I can't even go back to my own house. The 2 guards didn't listen at all, just coldly repeating, no one is allowed to enter. Upon hearing this, Yan Rujin already knew in her heart that her mother's current condition could no longer be frozen in the cold night. Looking at her father again, he's just in the hay of the stable. It's hard to say if he can survive tonight. Dead end. Everything was not only forcing her to submit, but also trying to save her parents' lives. Even if she agrees to marry someone else, she still doesn't have the qualifications to negotiate terms. Finally, one falls behind, only focusing on one's own wealth, and luxury, disregarding the reputation of nurturing a snake and scorpion heart. The He family and even the entire noble class in Haojing would be contemptuous. The Yen family has accurately grasped the grace of nurturing and the guilt in her heart for this matter, like leeches sucking on her bones and blood. In her past life, thousands of people cursed her for taking advantage of the debt owed to her by the He family, but little did they know that she was being held tightly by the He family. And the Yen family seemed to have agreed with the He family. She was just right, and the Yen family was definitely looking for trouble, forcing her to go to the He family and use all the strength she had accumulated. She's tired, she doesn't want to be the puppet that anyone else is involved with anymore, and she still has to be grateful to those people for a lifetime. This time, neither she nor her parents can die. She also doesn't want to go to that cannibalistic vortex anymore. The wooden roof of the firewood house collapsed with a loud bang. A charcoal, only the thickness of a little finger, caught fire and landed at Yan Rujian's feet. At this point, Yan Rujian had already made up her mind to force her to a dead end, so no one could have a better time. "Uncle Lu, please, can you help me take my father out of this stable?" The wind and snow blinded Yan Rujian, choking up hard. Lu Er didn't understand what she was going to do and was clearly hesitant. Yan Rujian hugged her mother and bit her lips in sorrow, saying, "I don't want to wait here to die. Can Uncle Lu lend me a flat car so that I can take my parents home?" How could this be? In the middle of the night, amidst the raging storm and snow, you little girl will die on this day. Watching the worrying nervousness on Uncle Lu's face, Yan Rujian looked helplessly at the many guards in the room, and to this day, no one has come out to extinguish the fire. With a cold smile in his heart, he could only weakly and cowardly say to Lu Er, "Isn't staying here also death?" Lu Er has a heart, but he is powerless. I couldn't help but smash my head in frustration and stomp my foot fiercely. "I'll go find it for you." In no time, a two-wheeled flatbed that was enough to lay down two people was pushed out. Yan Rujian could clearly see that on the flat car, Lu Er kindly placed a dirty and tattered cotton quilt on it. She could barely drag her mother, and Lu Er went to fight for Yan Nan in the stable. As soon as Lu Er saw Yan Rujian struggling to drag his mother Wang, he quickly placed Yan Nanjing in the car and came to help. "Why are you in such a hurry, girl? I haven't even finished speaking yet." After all, the four walls of the bang firewood house couldn't withstand it and collapsed together. At this point, Lu Er had already lifted Wang horizontally and placed her on the flat car. Yan Rujian looked at the stable not far away. Her small hands, which had already been frozen red and purple, were not afraid of scorching heat. Pinching the small piece of burning charcoal, it bounced directly into the hay-covered stable. Indifference. Might. Let's take a good look at how you, as towering individuals, can handle a post station without shelter from wind and snow. Lu Er did not notice Yan Rujian's movements. But he was also greatly frightened by the collapse of the house. "I don't know if even the heavens can't stand this room full of people." The charcoal fire that had just been thrown into the haystack by Yan Rujian caught fire with such a gust of wind. She saw the fire, just like the people in this room, watching the firewood shed where they were originally on fire, pretending not to see anything. Everyone in the room was nervous, and an elderly man with a gray beard nervously gave him a needle. He twisted his eyebrows strangely and pondered deeply, and his mouth couldn't help but say, I shouldn't. He Yanlan's heart tightened as she listened, and she couldn't help but glance at Suiqing. The two of them quietly retreated. Walking aside, He Yanlan frowned and said, "Did you find the secret letter on Yan Nanjing's body?" Suiqing shook her head slightly and quickly bowed to He Yanlan. "The maidservant has already sent the young lady's order to Ruying. When burning the mother and daughter, let's throw the Yannan controversy in two, so that their family can reunite." He Yanlan nodded slightly as she listened, feeling relieved. In this way, the secret letter that Dad said will never be published again. Suiqing smiled and looked at the faint flames flickering outside the window lattice. If everything goes smoothly, it will all turn into dust by now, he said, pushing a small crack open the window on his side. Looking through the gap, Yanlan noticed that the independent firewood room in a corner of the courtyard had already been burned into a pile of scrap wood. I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief in my heart. Xie must say that searching for medicine for the crown prince is fake, maybe it's also because of that secret letter. At this moment, Yanlan felt more and more uneasy about Xie Bai's attitude towards Yan Rujin just now. It has been 2 months since she left Beijing with him, and I have decided not to say more than 10 words to her. But he always had a strange feeling towards Yan Rujin, but she couldn't say it. Neither of these two people can be left behind. Puff. Xie Bai spewed out black blood and fainted. The elder who was originally administering the needle also turned pale with fear and quickly ordered, "Hurry up, go get a basin of water." Upon hearing this, Yanlan quickly gave Suiqing a glance. "Let Xie Bai's people go to fetch water, don't we let them know that there is a fire outside. She doesn't want to give Yan Rujin's family of 3 a chance of survival." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. So warm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. So warm. Suiqing stopped the guards and personally brought a basin of water. At this time, Yan Rujin was riding a donkey with Lu Er. "You don't have to wait until tomorrow, I'll follow you back to the village today." Upon hearing this, Yan Rujin felt a little guilty and said, "Uncle Lu, it's my family that has caused you trouble. It's such a big matter of going into the water, and no one came out to put out the fire. I'm destined to be the one who carried the blame. Besides, it's not your fault. You didn't set the fire either." As he was speaking, he saw a huge fire break out in the stable due to a gust of wind. The horses, who were still eating grass, screamed wildly and raised their hooves in shock, while the fire snake seemed to have no intention of stopping. The wind swept the straw in the stable without any bias, and it landed right on the precious cart that Yanlan was renowned for. Seeing this scene, Yan Rujin couldn't easily detect a tug at the corner of her mouth. "Uncle Lu, hurry up and leave." Lu Er didn't expect that the fire would shed, which was originally in a corner and far from the stable, could have ignited this place. As he watched the wind roll a flame onto a luxurious carriage just now, he instantly understood. Without hesitation, he sat on the frame of the flat car and whipped the donkey. The donkey ate the pain and quickly ran away. They had just come out of the side door of the post station when they saw a flame landing right next to the pillar of the side door, and the entire round wood was quickly ignited. Lu Er was a bit nervous with fear, and he felt that things were getting bigger. Stopped Yan Rujin at the main entrance of the post station and quickly got off the bus alone. Good people always instinctively do good things at this time. He quickly went to clap on the door and said, water's running, run away." Yan Rujin watched him anxiously tapping the door, but no one opened the door for him, let alone listen to what he said. She silently adjusted the angle of the flat car, facing the burning post station, looking at her parents and slightly covering them with bedding. "Mom and Dad, it's getting warmer now." At this moment, the entire post station's faint red light was becoming increasingly bright. But Yan Rujin smiled brightly, as if holding blood. It turns out that the snow-ravaged glutton can still be so warm. She sat quietly, watching the guards coming and going, desperately rescuing things. Of course, she was also watching, the one hiding in the dark, making her teeth itch with anger. She said to herself, "It's almost there. This heavy snow is also sensible. The whole house is on fire, and the snow and wind have stopped." Everyone was full of chaos, lined up with Yan Rujin, looking at the burning post station in front of them, unable to recall for a long time. Looking at Yanlan, who has always been towering like a fairy, now disheveled, even her clothes were burnt black. It can be imagined how embarrassed she was just now. She only took out her dowry, and the rest was in the fire, leaning against Suiqing, whose hair had been burned halfway, crying bitterly. At this moment, Yan Rujin also realized that there were only 2 guards and 1 elder by Xia Bai's side. The elderly person was carrying a medicine box and hunched over. Watching Yan Rujin always feels familiar, but upon closer reflection, it seems unlikely. But at this moment, Yan Rujin also discovered. There are dozens of guards on He Yanlan's side, each adorned with colors of various sizes. The 4 people on Xia Bai's side only have some mud stains on Xia Bai's fox fur. Just as Yan Rujin was happily roasting the fire, while watching the delightful scenery. Previously, he pointed his sword at her guard and half knelt on the ground, clasping his fists and saying, "Miss Yan, I was reckless just now. I hope Miss Yan can be. What's going on?" Yan Rujin blinked her watery eyes, which were bright and clear reflected by the flames. "Miss Yan, you don't mind being petty. I am willing to pay a lot of money to buy the donkey on your frame." Upon hearing these words, Yan Rujin felt really happy in her heart. Looking left and right, their group rescued many horses, but he insisted on his own donkey. At this moment, He Yanlan realized that they were in such a mess, while Yan Rujin, with her parents, sat well on a strange 2-wheeled car, even reaching out to smoke in the void. How can it be done? Helping Cuiching stumble and stumble, he approached and held his former stance, saying, "I have rescued a few horses from Mo Shi's side, which can be shared with Brother Buan and you." Upon hearing the name Mo Shi, Yan Rujin suddenly remembered that Xia Bai would always be accompanied by a masked guard named Mo Shi. "I didn't expect that Mo Shi, who used to be able to retreat from the northern Liang with 100,000 iron cavalry alone, would also have such a humble moment." Mo Shi listened to He Yanlan's words and couldn't help but furrow his brow as he thought about the recent fire, ignoring her. Continuing to clench her fists, she said, "Miss Yan, the fire is fierce, and my young master's medicine has been left on the fire. Now we need to use donkey blood as a medicinal guide. I hope Miss Yan can succeed." As he spoke, he immediately kowtowed deeply to Yan Rujin. No borrowing. Mo Shi never thought that Yan Rujin could still refuse coldly after he kowtowed. Even He Yanlan was shocked. Watching Yan Rujin speak incoherently, it took him a long time to regain his sanity. Incredibly, he said, Why do you refuse?" Listening to her words, Yan Rujin looked coldly at He Yanlan and said to her word by word, "Oh my goodness, who let the firewood room catch fire?" Mo Shi looked at Yan Rujin and said these words, but he also agreed. The fire was very strange. Even the entire process was absurd to the extreme. Although Miss Yan Mo Shi is a guard, she also knows that a gentleman's words are hard to follow. "I swear to heaven that as long as Miss Yan is willing to lend me a donkey, I will definitely investigate the cause of the fire. In addition, I owe Miss Yan 1 life from Mo Shi." If it were someone else, they would definitely agree at this moment. Yan Rujin looked at the raging fire and said, 3 lives, they are so light and floating. Mo Shi was speechless for a moment, but also somewhat angry. At this moment, He Yanlan spoke up at the right time and said, What 3 lives? Aren't everyone okay?" She knew what Yan Rujin was saying, but pretended not to understand how many people were counting left and right. Anticipating that He Yanlan would say so, Yan Rujin looked at the fire and said coldly, "It's not my donkey." Upon hearing this, Mo Shi hurriedly said, "Whose is that? I'll go and ask." At this moment, Cuiching also came over and casually said, "What do you care about these things? Just lead them over directly." Upon hearing this, Yan Rujin turned to Cuiching and said, "Yes, he killed our family of 3, and no one knew about throwing bodies in the wilderness, right?" Unconsciously nodding, Cuiching suddenly realized and quickly pretended to be careful, standing behind her own young lady with grievances. "Miss, I am also rescuing His Royal Highness the 7th Prince." He Yanlan looked at Yan Rujin, who had just been cautious at the post station. At this moment, her teeth were sharp and her mouth was sharp, and she couldn't help but need to re-examine her. Looking at Yan Rujin with a smile, he said to Mo Shi, "I've heard my mother mention before that my younger sister is lucky and lucky. It's not like I saw her today. Such a big fire didn't harm her at all." Suiqing couldn't hear the implied meaning of her own young lady. She had just eaten a piece of food, so she pretended to be careful, but whispered in a voice that everyone could hear, "Maybe she set fire and ran out on her own." Mo Shi couldn't help but coldly look at Yan Rujin as he listened. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Means. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Means. But Yan Rujin didn't take it seriously at all. She looked at Lu Er with a disheveled face and said indifferently, "The donkey belongs to his family." Lu Er was momentarily taken aback and said directly, "This donkey was originally borrowed from your family, it's your donkey." Yan Rujin never expected this. And Lu Er, originally smiling at Yan Rujin, suddenly turned a cold face towards He Yanlan's master and servant. "Setting fire and running out on my own. My throat is hoarse when I shout, water runs out, why isn't anyone listening? Why aren't there any drops of water in the buckets and tanks in the backyard?" The more he spoke, the more angry Lu Er became. He pinched his waist and pointed to the guard of He Yanlan not far away, saying, "I want to put out the fire. Who is blocking me from even bringing a bucket into the house?" Upon hearing this, Mo Shi felt a sense of uncertainty and directly took off the gold medal from his waist. "Miss Yan, you can take this waist token and make any demands on me, as long as it's not for harming my young master or committing heinous crimes. I'll be at your beck and call until you think you're done with it." Taking the gold medal, I glanced left and right and saw that it was exquisitely carved with many patterns. The name of the ink stone was on the front and back of the Jin Yue. "You can lead the donkey, but we won't be able to go home, so you need to safely escort us home." Mo Shi immediately clenched his fists and said, "This is no problem." Yan Rujin nodded with satisfaction and said, "Let's take it away." Upon hearing this, Mo Shi laughed and quickly got up, then went to untie the rope on the donkey's body. He Yanlan hurriedly said, "Suiqing, help your brother Mo Shi quickly." Suiqing hurriedly approached attentively, but Mo Shi coldly dodged his body and said, "You don't have to trouble Miss Suiqing." The speaker effortlessly untied the rope and led the donkey away. As Mo Shi walked further and further away, He Yanlan watched Yan Rujin's small figure achieve success and kept shaking Mo Shi's waist tag, her teeth almost biting. But he could only smile and say, "I didn't expect that my sister really has the means." Means. Miss, he can take the heinous crime of burning the post station on me with just a few words. As she spoke, Yan Rujin looked at He Yanlan with a fearful and timid expression, "You scared me to death." How could He Yanlan not listen to her implied meaning and think that the things arranged by his father were not done well? She had to endure her temper no matter how angry she was. I couldn't help but pick up a handkerchief and start pretending to wipe tears. "Sister, I know you must have misunderstood me. How could I have such thoughts?" As she spoke, she leaned over to Yan Rujin's side and said, "Mother has been nagging us all these years about having a sister like you. We miss you so much. It's all third aunt who has taken you far away, making it so difficult for us to find her. So, why did you give me away in the beginning? I heard that the dead man's ditch lasted for 4 days, and it was my mother who went to pick me up." As soon as He Yanlan heard it, it was obvious that she knew all these secrets. She quickly changed her tone and said, "Ah. Is there something like this? It must have been said by Aunt San. When your mother came to recognize me and confronted my mother, I heard it with my own ears outside the door." Upon hearing these words, He Yanlan was taken aback. She couldn't help but calculate in her heart, and suddenly it reminded her. Taking advantage of the situation, she grabbed Yan Rujin's hand. "Good sister, you must have misunderstood your mother. You don't even know. This time, your mother wants to recognize you because she wants you to marry the crown prince in Haojing. She wants you to be the most prestigious crown princess in the world, and in the future, she will be the empress. Speaking without forgetting to wink at Suiqing, she quickly went to hug her dowry. To be so familiar, she also said so in her past life. I don't know what a crown princess is, and I haven't seen that crown prince before. I just want to be with my parents. She wanted to see how they acted and whether they were still the same as in their past lives. As she spoke, Suiqing quickly opened her dowry and took out a delicate hairpin adorned with phoenix and peony from a brocade box embedded with mother.in.law. I saw a shining east pearl in the mouth of the phoenix. This is something bestowed upon our family by the palace. Your mother has been keeping it for you, she said, and placed it in Yan Rujian's hand. Looking at Yan Rujian's bewildered expression, it was obvious that she had been knocked unconscious by the overwhelming wealth, but Yanlan turned to injustice again. To be honest with my sister, this hairpin is the only one I've begged my mother for a long time, but she never allowed it. She always says it's for you. Suiqing looked at Yan Rujian's bewildered expression and naturally knew that this was just a small family with shallow eyelids and had never seen anything good before. Hurriedly snatched it from Yan Rujian's hand and said, "Miss, how can such a good thing be given to others?" Pop. The loud slapping sound even startled Yan Rujian, who couldn't help but exclaim that this scene was truly identical to her previous life. Even the timing of this slap is so precise. If it weren't for the limitations of her current identity, Yan Rujian really wanted to applaud their master and servant. If she hadn't been sent to the theater troupe, she would have been demoted. What kind of bystander? Suiqing, I'm warning you again. This is our third young lady. If you dare to speak nonsense again, I'll see if I can pull out your tongue. As she spoke, she snatched the phoenix hairpin from Suiqing's hand and prepared to thrust it into Yan Rujian's head. Don't forget to say, don't you still know that the sick young master is the seventh prince of our Jin state? Put it on, let's go and see the seventh prince later. I'll introduce you to him. In her past life, Yan Rujian foolishly put on this hairpin and claimed to take her out to eat the delicacies of Haojing. As a result, it can be imagined that everyone knew that the phoenix hairpin she was wearing on her head was a betrothal gift given to Yanlan by the crown prince in front of all the nobles in Haojing. From then on, the news of her snatching Yanlan's engagement spread. With a tilt of her head, Yan Rujian cleverly avoided her hand. With Suiqing still covering her face and feeling aggrieved, Yan Rujian quickly got up and jumped away. Miss He, you are the precious gem in the hands of the Minister of Personnel in Haojing. I am just a small left guard's daughter, and I dare not climb high, let alone touch such a precious treasure. Speaking, he returned to his previous defense. I still have to take care of my parents, don't give them away. The phoenix hairpin in his hand fell into the air, and at this moment, Empress also saw this scene. Watching Yanlan holding the golden hairpin particularly glaring, he looked deeply at Yan Rujian. I thought to myself, at noon, Miss He from the He family is amazing. It was Yan Rujian who had to use the crown prince's engagement to admit her marriage. Why is she showing such a behavior now? Just as I was thinking about it, Xiaofu took a mouthful of thick blood and sprayed it out again. Fortunately, this time it was red. Picking up the firewood burned at the post station, the elder held a bowl of donkey blood on one side and slowly added it to the medicine. At this moment, Yan Rujian also noticed that her donkey had fallen to the ground, and she didn't even hear the sound of the donkey struggling to death. Upon closer inspection, there seemed to be a flesh lump on the doctor's side, which looked more and more like a heart. Watching the strange technique of adding something to the blood, Yan Rujian looked at the familiar figure again and was pleasantly surprised to find that she knew him. Meiji. The most eccentric divine doctor in the world only accepts one male disciple and a few named disciples throughout his life, without accepting female disciples or treating women. His treatment methods are even more peculiar. But at this moment, he only used the hard work of a donkey to boil medicine, and the whole donkey was in vain. Suddenly, Yan Rujin realized something was wrong. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Going Home. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Going home. In his past life, the seventh Prince Xiaobai did not find a good prescription on a certain mountain. After hearing rumors, he began to search for immortals and detoxify in the mountains, and the one he was looking for was Meiji. At that time, it was widely rumored that he searched for 3 years, begged for 2 years, and within a month, the poison on his body was detoxified. Xiaobai knelt in front of Meiji's gate and begged for a long time, finally inviting him to come out of the mountain to treat the crown prince. She entered the capital for 5 years, and the crown prince passed away. Xiaobai blamed himself for bringing Meiji to the capital 1 day late. Because of this self-blame, he even covered the sky with one hand and controlled the court and the wilderness, but he only served as the regent. In his past life, he only found Meiji for at least 3 years, but in this life, how could he find him so quickly? If she changed the course of history by refusing to recognize her relatives, but looking at Xiaobai's line, it is obvious that she changed history before. Where exactly is the problem? As the sky gradually brightened, the big fire was still burning, and the snow around the post station melted completely. Yan Rujin stayed up all night, afraid that someone might take their lives in her sleep. Fortunately, after being roasted over such a big fire all night, Yan Rujin had already seen her mother and father's faces start to blush. At dawn, Yan Rujin finally gathered her courage and walked towards Meiji, who had just finished her work. Meiji, who had just poured the medicine, had to be careful not to let his beard fall into the bowl. As he was about to go and fetch the medicine bowl, a figure stood in front of his face. Startled, he glanced at Yan Rujin with some annoyance. Go, 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 go. I don't treat women. At this moment, there was no one on either side. Yan Rujin lowered her head and remained silent as he passed by her holding a medicine bowl. She pretended to be surprised and said, "Hey, it's this way of decocting medicine again." After speaking, Yan Rujin didn't hesitate to turn around and leave. Dugu Lu Meiji stood still, with the same sentence in his mind for a long time. This is another method of decocting medicine. Mo Shi saw Meiji standing still and quickly approached, saying, "Divine Doctor, what's wrong with you?" When Meiji was called out by him, he immediately regained his senses and didn't look at Mo Shi. He then handed the medicine bowl in his hand to Mo Shi. "I'll go see your highness later," he said urgently. Yan Rujin had already gone to guard her mother again, while Lu Er, who was sleeping on one side of the stone, stretched lazily and looked at Yan Rujin. Jin woke up so early. After speaking, he realized something was wrong. "You didn't stay up all night, did you?" Yan Rujin nodded slightly and whispered, "I'm afraid." Lu Er empathized and looked at the burning post station in front of him, with a mix of flavors. Clearly, this fire doesn't need to be ignited. As he spoke, he glanced at himself again and couldn't help but sigh, alas. Yan Rujin also lowered her head in thought. Now that the sun has risen, she also has to take her parents home. Turning around, I almost bumped into someone. Yan Rujin was frightened and took several steps back, only to realize that the person coming was Meiji. He smiled and said, "Little girl, do you need someone to help you? I can help you treat your parents' illness." As he spoke, his eyes were filled with anticipation. Although Yan Rujin's heart was very excited at this moment, she couldn't express it. With great caution, he opened his arms and stood between Meiji and his parents, saying, No need, I can also find a doctor to help my parents treat me when I go home." After Yan Rujin finished speaking, she quickly turned to Lu Er for help. Lu Er wanted to come forward and smooth things out, but Yan Rujin didn't give him the time to speak and said directly, "Uncle Lu, let's hurry up and leave." Meiji, after all, is a renowned divine doctor who has been treated with such caution for the first time. If he had used to use some means, but this time he had to hold back. After 40 years without any news, he finally unexpectedly learned a little news about that person and couldn't miss it. Meiji, who had always been cold, immediately called out to Empress and others, "Hurry up, after feeding the medicine, we have to set off." He said this to Yan Rujin. The old man Meiji, who has always been cold and eccentric, is now as kind as a neighbor's grandfather. Smile hard at Yan Rujin. Yan Rujin looked a bit scared and glanced at Empress who was feeding medicine. After Empress finished feeding the medicine, he quickly came over and saluted, "Miss Yan, don't be afraid. This is a famous divine doctor in our Jin country, surnamed Mei. You should have heard of him." Yan Rujin shook her head slightly and turned to look at him, still full of suspicion. Meiji quickly stopped Empress, who wanted to explain with a good temper, and said with a smile, "It's just a false name. Isn't Miss Yan going home? Let's take Miss Yan home now." Along the way, due to the presence of Empress and Meiji as protectors, Yanlan didn't even have a chance to get close. The pitiful master and servant shared a horse, and even the unconscious Xiaobai was tied to another guard, riding slowly on the horse. Her accompanying guards, each with injuries, were carrying shovels to clear the snow along the way. Fortunately, they are all people with martial arts skills. Originally, they rode horses for an hour, but only then did they arrive at the Yan family village where Yan Rujin was located, from sunrise to clear moon and sparse stars. If one plan fails, Yanlan will not feel at ease. This allows the guards to pass on a message to the Yan family, not to mention, but also to pass on a false message to Xiaobai and his group. Report. Traces of blood Lingji were found 30 miles away. A panting guard rushed over on horseback, looking at Yan Rujin's figure and knowing that it was Ruying. Meiji was originally planning to send Yan Rujin home, but he received news from blood Lingji. He is somewhat in a dilemma. After all, they came to Chongjun Ridge for the sake of blood Lingji. Carefully discussing with Yan Rujin, she said, "Little girl, blood Lingji is a rare herb. I guarantee with my reputation that I will be back in 3 days." Yan Rujin thought about the matter of walking a few steps to the village entrance. Of course, she believed in Meiji, but she always felt that this matter was strange. Just as they left Yan Rujin and her group at the village entrance, ready to leave, Yan Rujin stopped Empress and only said one sentence. "I saw the person who just reported the news when the post station caught fire." After speaking, Yan Rujin turned around and left, leaving Empress staring at the figure tightly. He appeared to be carefully standing not far from Yanlan. Finally, Lu Er helped push Yan Rujin's parents and finally arrived at the door of Yan Mansion. Yan Rujin hurried to knock on the door. "Steward Lu, my mother and I have brought my father back. Open the door quickly." Yan Rujin quickly breathed a warm breath into her palm. He let out a cry, but the watchdog didn't even respond. Yan Rujin intensified her efforts and shouted, "Manager Lu." At this moment, the dog barked, but it seemed as if someone had pinched its mouth hard. "Grandmother. Uncle Air. Open the door quickly, grandmother." Knocking and tapping at the door, neighbors came out one after another carrying lanterns to see, but the gate of Yan Mansion was tightly closed. At this moment, Yan Rujin's mother, Wang Yuxian, who was originally asleep, gradually woke up. Watching her daughter desperately tapping on the door without responding, she anxiously and weakly hurriedly got up. But as soon as he got off the flat car, he fell and was helped up by the Lu family. While thanking, Wang Yuxian quickly stumbled forward to help knock on the door and shout. After only patting twice, Yan Rujin had no strength anymore. She watched as she slammed and kicked the door even harder. There was not a single movement inside the door. Gradually, as more and more people gathered, Wang Yuxian looked at his daughter's swollen hands and quickly stopped her. "I patted the door and begged, 'Mother, the Southern controversy has made contributions to the country and fought for glory for the Yan family. Let's go in, it's icy and snowy.'" End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Humiliation in front of the door. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 8 Humiliation in front of the door. Seeing that there was still no response, Wang Yuxian patted the door for a while and couldn't help but say weakly, "Mother, open the door. Nanjing is your flesh and blood. Do you want to watch him freeze to death at the doorstep?" As he spoke, he couldn't help but kneel in front of the door and cry. Yan Rujin hugged her mother tightly. Her mother was already seriously ill, and it was not easy to do so. She was frozen outside like this. The entire Yan family wants them to die. "Mother, don't take photos." Yan Rujin's tears of heartache rolled in her eyes. Lu Er couldn't see it from the side, so he said, "Why don't you go to our house first to make ends meet?" As soon as these words were spoken, I heard Manager Lu's cold words. The old master said, "Those who meddle in things will rent 5 times the land next year." As soon as he heard someone inside, Wang Yuxian, even though his hands were swollen, urgently patted the door and said, "Steward Lu, please go talk to the old lady and the old master, let us in. Even if we don't let us in, let Nanjing in." Before he could finish speaking, Lu, the steward, sneered, "The old master and the old lady are angry that you didn't come home at night and ran with your daughter all night. It's really inappropriate. Just open the door, accept the punishment first, and kneel at the door until dawn." I don't know if it was hallucination, but Yan Rujin clearly heard a burst of theft and ridicule behind the door. Her mother was momentarily blinded. As long as she kneels down, it is equivalent to admitting that she did not return home at night and did dirty things, which tarnished the reputation of the Langyawang family, as well as the reputation of her and her daughter. I don't recognize it. What I brought back is the eldest son of the Yan family, who has brought glory to your entire Yan family. Madam, how could you be so cruel? You don't even recognize your own son. Wang Yuxian, who was in a hurry, gritted his teeth and spat out his mouth, but he didn't want to hear any sound inside the door again. The angry sound of the crutch hitting the ground, accompanied by an old and malicious tone, said, "You left yesterday at noon and said to go pick someone up. It was even deeper tonight to pick them up. You lied to me, an old lady, with such a cruel heart, and brought a wild man to let me recognize your son." Everyone present took a deep breath of air in one sentence. Lu Er immediately spat out and said, "This is Brother Yan. If you have the ability, come out and recognize someone." "Humph, Lu Er's family. If you don't want to rent a field, just say it directly. Tomorrow, let someone pull out all the seedlings in the field, so don't plant them either." Yan Rujin and Wang Yuxian looked at Lu Er one after another. Lu Er was also a bit confused, but still had some anger. "If you don't rent, then don't rent." Before he could finish speaking, Wang Yuxian panicked. His already beautiful face appeared old and tired due to his illness, so he quickly went to stop Lu Er's words. She can no longer burden others and immediately opens her mouth to the tightly closed door. "Based on the facts, why do you need to harm others, mother? Who is your mother? You're such a promiscuous woman, and you brought back a wild seed, a wild man, and you're not clear with those in the same village. Mother. You." Madame Yan couldn't help but sneer as she listened. "Oh, what's wrong? Do you still want to suppress me with the Langyawang family? I told you that the Langyawang family has been raided, and you little hoof, you have no support. I advise you to take off my clothes and get out of here quickly." As he spoke, another pitiful crack opened in the door, and a little maid walked out. She held the tray and nodded, "Big. Hurry up and take off your clothes. The Yan family will leave you some dignity." Dignified. Is this the dignity given by the Yan family? Yan Rujin immediately rushed forward, and the originally shining seam immediately closed tightly. Yan Rujin, who couldn't help but feel angry, asked without hesitation, "Since the day my mother got married, she has carried her dowry in a total of 888 households, with hundreds of acres of fertile land and dozens of shops. This is now the Yan mansion. Your current attire is supported by my mother's dowry. Why do you rely on it? Due to her inability to spread branches and leaves for the Yen family, her disregard for women's morals, and her audacity to bring wild men back to the mansion to support her. Those dowry shops have long been filled in by her own family's empty space, and now this Yen mansion has nothing to do with you. As soon as Mrs. Yen finished speaking, a servant with a bright long knife rushed out from the crack in the door. One by one, fierce and evil spirits surrounded Yen Rujian's mother and daughter, and they shouted angrily, "Take off! It's a great shame." Wang Yuxian, who was originally from a scholarly family, has always been an enviable presence since marrying her husband Yan Nan. My parents-in-law look up to me, and my sister-in-law respects me. No one in the 8 corners of the country doesn't say that although Wang Yuxian is a low married man, his fate is good. Previously, the Yen family was full of white people, but the leader of the Yen family made a name for himself and secretly went to join the army without telling his family. As expected, his life should have it, and the congratulatory plaque would be sent to this Yen family every 3 to 5 times. No matter what they said before, they praised her for her good fortune and bringing prosperity to the entire family. Now that the Wang family of Langya is in trouble, her husband is also unconscious, and the Yen family is treating their mother and daughter like this. Mom, feel your conscience and say, "I can't give birth." When Mrs. Yen heard that she was going to pour dirty water on her own house and couldn't finish speaking, she gritted her teeth and cursed angrily, "You shameless woman, how dare you pour dirty water on my Yen family even at this time?" As he spoke, he ordered, "Someone, strip off their clothes." The servants holding knives are about to get started, and Yen Rujian will hold the silver needle in Meiji's hand. As long as they dare to approach, they will surely regret it for a lifetime. At this moment, a trembling female elder stood out in the crowd. Yen Rujian looked at her with familiar eyes, but couldn't figure it out. "Yencheng, don't act too recklessly." The old lady recognized the person and said coldly, "Sister-in-law, take care of your own family." Upon hearing these words, Yen Rujian remembered that the old woman seemed to be her grandmother. She had only met a few times before and had been told that she was too sick to get out of bed. In her past life, she had just entered Beijing when she heard the news of her death. A good person doesn't last long. Jin is the granddaughter of our Yen family, and Yu Xian is the daughter-in-law of our Yen family. If you do this, you won't be afraid to talk about our Yen family from all over the place. Who dares to propose marriage to our Yen family in the future when they are innocent? As the grandmother spoke, she didn't forget to lift Yen Rujian and her daughter. The pitiful eyes on them were genuine, and tears couldn't stop flowing. At this moment, Lady Yen finally appeared, and the sky also began to brighten. I saw the gate of Yen Mansion wide open, and Lady Yen sat on the soft stool of the entire tiger skin shop, wrapped in a fur cloak, with a lazy and rebellious posture. "Old sister-in-law, don't hold on to the airs of the Yunmengchen family anymore. What kind of airs are you putting on? My house is led by Generals Wu Wei." With a cold eye, he gouged out his sister-in-law and sneered, "My children and grandchildren are going to visit the capital and become prime ministers in the future. In the territory of Chongzhenling, no one can really climb up to our Yen family." Before he could finish speaking, he raised his hand and pointed contemptuously at his sister-in-law, saying, "Including you Yunmengchen family. You." Yen Rujian was so angry that she could only say, "You," so she couldn't hold her breath and quickly went to help smooth her heart. After finally getting better, she could only point to the old lady Yen and say weakly, "Okay, tell me how much their clothes cost, I'll buy them. Thank you very much for the recommended tickets. I never admit to being a timid person, but this time, I have never dared to read the data of my own book since it was published. Thank you again for your recommended tickets. More is better, and I don't know if anyone has given me a monthly ticket. Anyway, those who are watching, love you." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Forcing into Deep Mountains. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 9. Forcing into deep mountains. Mrs. Yen seemed to be humiliated enough, pointing at Yen Rujin and her daughter and sneering, if they pay, 1 cent is enough. If you pay, less than 1,000 taels is not worth it. Shame, Yen Rujin had already heard the humiliation of Lady Yen, which was humiliating her mother and daughter, including her fellow grandmothers, in front of the entire Yen family. Grandmother's family is now in a weak position, and even if she empties out 1,000 taels, she cannot take them out. Moreover, they cannot even use up 1 or 2 taels of silver in their clothes. Speaking of 1,000 taels, Lady Yen accurately humiliates them and tells them what overconfidence is. I have a penny here, can I leave now? Without hesitation, Yen Rujin took out a penny from her sleeve and threw it over. Before Mrs. Yen could react, Yen Rujin took her mother and walked step by step down the steps in front of the Yen mansion. She didn't forget to say, "Don't forget, my dad will always wake up one day." I don't know why, but the wild maid that Madame Yen has always despised suddenly spoke a word that made her feel scared. Closing the door of the mansion brought Yen Lao-san, and his 3 daughters to his side. Yes, the family was neat and urged Yen Rujin and her daughter to go and pick them up. They simply stayed and cleaned the people and things left by Wang Yuxian. Madame Yen was so angry that she felt a headache from Yen Rujin, and had the servants around her rub her temples. After all, it was a young girl. Mrs. Yen impatiently knocked off her hand and angrily scolded, "Get out of here now." Coincidentally, the second family arrived at this time. Cheng Shi, have both the girl and the mother-in-law been sold? How did Grandma Xing handle it? The words were not finished yet. Cheng Jialing, the daughter-in-law of the second family, looked at me with a reassuring expression as she handled things. I just used the excuse of asking for a few maids from their yard, saying it was a favor for me, and they all asked for that Grandma Xing. Upon hearing this, Lady Yen hurriedly said, "Then, Grandma Xing." She really missed the way Grandma Xing pressed her head and urgently asked about her whereabouts. "Xing Mama naturally sold it along with those girls," Cheng said as she looked at the old lady with a furrowed brow. Fearing that she would ask for money to buy and sell, she immediately added, "The girl Xing Mama gave birth to is really strange. She is young and has endless strength. Only a few big men used ropes to tie her up when she went to the place. I was also anxious at the time, so I didn't sell her for much money. I was also afraid that she would go back and stuff a lot of tea money." Speaking, the third family came over, still holding a ledger in their hand. "This is sister-in-law's dowry list." "Who? I don't have such a daughter-in-law in the Yen family," the old lady said as she saw her daughters coming in, chatting and laughing. Judging from their attire, they should have just picked out some jewelry to wear from the warehouse. This scene happened to fall into the eyes of the 2 sister-in-law. "We are busy all the time, but we don't have the chance to enjoy our lives." Cheng Jialing, the second wife, immediately sat on the stool with an unhappy expression on her face. Lu Ruoruo, the third daughter-in-law, whose face was still smiling, became stiff. She imitated the appearance of her second sister-in-law, and did not look at the 3 powerful sisters. Mrs. Yen looked at the family with a headache and patted the table, saying, "What are you doing? What about the second and third?" Speaking, looking out, nothing came out. Mrs. Yen helped her forehead and said, "I've also been foolishly listening to your words. If the boss wakes up, how can I survive?" At this moment, the old master of the Yen family entered the house with 2 sons, one on the left and one on the right, as if talking about a bug or ant. "Find a chance, kill 100, said coldly. The whole family nodded slightly as they listened to this sentence. Yen Rujin was originally planning to go to Lu Er's house with a flat cart, but just as she walked to the door, Yen's servants came to Lu Er's house. Seeing this situation, although Wang Yuxian was sick and weak, he also knew the meaning of the Yen family. Seizing Yen Rujin's hand, he said, "Let's go," and don't implicate innocent people. Before dawn, the people of the Yen family followed behind. There were people watching jokes on both sides of the road, some of whom were genuinely sympathetic, but they were all scared back by the Yen family. It wasn't until they left the Yen family village and headed towards the deep mountains that the Yen family's servants couldn't keep up. Jean, I'm sorry for letting you suffer with me. Wang Yuxian looked at his husband, unaware of his life or death. With tears in his eyes, he said, you should have followed your mother, otherwise you don't have to suffer this kind of child's pain. Yen Rujin listened to her sore nose and lowered her head, whispering, Mom, don't you want me anymore? Wang Yuxian was also taken aback by this remark, crying as he held her in his arms and said, I have no children. I have raised you for more than 10 years, and one day during these 10 years, I will not see you as my own. I will do my best to give you the best. How could my mother have the heart to give me to someone who has already thrown me once? Aren't my mother afraid that she will do something even more heinous? Wang Yuxian was also deceived. At first, she always thought she was at fault. This is someone else's child, and if they come here normally. She was as happy as Jean could choose her, but she always felt guilty and felt that she was someone else's child. Looking at her mother's expression, Yen Rujin continued, my own child can't bear her suffering, just like her mother did to me. But what did that person ask me to go to Beijing for? Marry a dying person for her daughter. Wang Yuxian was also stunned, tears still in his eyes, so surprised that he didn't know how to say it. Yen Rujin couldn't see any emotions clearly on her face. She hugged her mother and whispered, look, she knows who her daughter is, who is a tool, and who is an outsider. But why does her mother always let her daughter go? Wang Yuxian is not the kind of gentle and weak person she didn't know before. Now that I know, I immediately wiped away the tears from my face. You're my daughter, she can't believe it. She glanced at Yen Nanjing in the flat car, but felt a bit discouraged. Yen Rujin held her mother's hand and gestured to her, Mother, the most important thing is that our family of 3 is together, isn't it? Wang Yuxian was already seriously ill and had not yet recovered. He looked at the big mountain in front of him and then at the Yen family village behind him. Yen Rujin was completely indifferent and said, let's go, Mother. We need to find a place to live while it's still dawn. Since marrying, Wang Yuxian has never left the Yen family village, and only heard of fierce beasts on this mountain. Jean, you may not know that there are many jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards on this mountain. This autumn, your Yen Jioshu's leg was only bitten off by a tiger, which was saved by the villagers' joint efforts. Yen Rujin glanced at the Yen family servants who were still staring at them from afar and said, Mom, are they scary? Wang Yuxian looked at his daughter's inexplicable peace of mind and smiled, saying, your mother won't live in the mountains, what should we do? Don't be afraid, I can. Yen Rujin patted her heart confidently. The mother and daughter entered the mountains with a smile. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Peak Turn. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Peak Turn, Madam, Mississippi. The smiles of the mother and daughter had not yet restrained when a figure stumbled and fell in front of their faces. Looking at her robust figure, with phoenix eyes and small cherry lips, Yen Rujin recognized her at a glance. She was a maid named Peach, whom she had grown up with since childhood. She quickly crouched down to help, nervously examining her surroundings. In winter, wearing only a single garment, there are many bloodstains on it, and wounds are visible in the tattered areas, as if one by one is shouting with their mouths open. Peach, why are you here? Yen Rujin's nose was sour, and tears couldn't help but swirl in her eyes, and her voice choked up. Peach had long been crying uncontrollably, holding on to her young lady tightly while shaking her head desperately. The second and third rooms tricked us into tailoring winter clothes. As soon as we entered the room, they asked us to have tea, but soon we all fainted. When I woke up, I had already sold us to the Zaohonglu in the county town. Yan Rujin's pupils trembled as she listened. Wang Yuxian was so shocked that he immediately knelt beside Peach, hugging her shoulders and letting her look at him. Nervously, he said, "Where's your mother? Where's your father? And red fruits. They used underage red fruits to blackmail my mother. My mother fought to death and made me run out of the Zhaohonglu, begging madam to save my mother and red fruits." The scene of the master and servant recognizing each other happened to be seen by the Yan family members wandering outside the mountains and forests. The leader has extremely sharp eyes. It seems that the work done by those people who raised the household was not good, and they even let a girl run back. A servant with obvious dog legs on his side leaned forward and said, "Yan Liuya, our people in the mountains are all in ambush. As long as they walk to a place where no one can see them, they can." Speaking, he wiped his neck with a knife. Yan Lu knows that the Yan family has already approached the He family, so he will definitely enter Haojing in the future. He must seize the opportunity at this moment and never make any mistakes. "Wait a minute, encircle and suppress," Yan Lu immediately ordered. Everyone, including the servant with dog legs, was a bit hesitant. Yan Lu looked at the servant with obvious eyebrows and eyes, who was only scared and had dog legs. He dared to step forward and say, "Sixth Lord, the villagers behind are all watching." Yan Lu didn't even look at the villagers from behind and said coldly, "That's not so much nonsense." After speaking, he drew his sword directly, making everyone timidly follow him. Yan Rujin unintentionally turned around and saw the servants who had been watching rushing towards her. "Hurry up, don't say anything for now. We need to quickly settle my dad down." Wang Yuxian didn't react for a moment. Just as Yan Rujin was about to speak, she hurriedly said, "Mom, come and give me a hand." Speaking, she pulled her mother and didn't let her look behind her. Yan Rujin knew that they were in a hurry and wanted to kill and silence. Peach quickly picked up the flat car and said, "Miss, I have a lot of strength. Let me come." Yan Rujin was a bit worried and said, "Your injury?" "It's okay, I've come back from the 30-mile mountain road." Peach gave Yan Rujin a reassuring smile. Otherwise, Peach's physique is really strange. The mountain road is rugged and she is seriously injured. She pulls a flat bike as if walking on the ground. "Taozi, it's more convenient to take my father along the Nyuyang road at the northern foot." Peach responded and walked towards the northern foothills. Upon hearing about the northern foothills, Wang Yuxian was somewhat worried and said, Jin, there will still be some sun at the southern foothills, while the northern foothills will be shaded. This night will definitely be difficult." Normal people would think so, so Yan Rujin dares to conclude that the people lurking in the mountains must be waiting at the southern foothills. At this moment, with her parents, she is having difficulty moving around. She must find a way to quickly arrange for her parents first. "Mom, I know there's a cave at the northern foot, could you please settle it first? Besides, we don't know how dangerous the mountain is yet. We can't wander around like headless flies with our dad in this mountain." Wang Yuxian nodded slightly as he listened. The hemp rope was carefully picked and broken, causing Wang Yuxian to stumble and fall directly to the ground. Yan Rujin quickly grabbed her hand and instinctively touched her mother's forehead, which was scorching hot and frightening. No problem, let's go quickly." Wang Yuxian knew he was dragging down his daughter and wanted to say he could persevere, but the dizziness became increasingly severe. Yan Rujin saw the situation and quickly helped her mother onto the flat car. Fortunately, Yan Rujin remembered correctly. Just as she walked to the northern foothills, she saw a small cave that could accommodate 2 people. In front of the cave, there is also a huge stone that can serve as a natural barrier. But her mother's condition is getting worse and worse. Where are the people? Go find them. Yan Rujin had just hidden her parents in this small cave when she heard the voice of the Yan family servants looking for someone. Taozi was extremely nervous and said, "Mississippi." "Shoo." Yan Rujin raised her head slightly and saw the Yan family servants who had just come after her. I only heard Yan Lu visibly cursing impatiently. Grandma, where did Madame Gong go in the blink of an eye? Lu Shi's people all ran to the southern foothills, and there were no two left here. Yan Lu was impatient, so he asked his subordinates to find Lu Shi and others who were ambushed at the southern foot. As expected, like Yan Rujin's conjecture, she had a concern in her heart. Quietly bypass everyone and dive towards the mountaintop with peaches. It wasn't until the sun shone 3 poles that I quietly descended the mountain. They have many people, hiding is not a solution. You go to the southern foothills according to the plan and lead that group of people towards the mountaintop. Peach nodded slightly as she listened, but quickly shook her head and said, I have to protect Mississippi. Hurry up. Yan Rujin instinctively furrowed her brows and eyes. Immediately, he changed back to his original state. In a moment, the big pit on the mountaintop will converge. Taozi had never seen such a cold and fierce young lady before, and instinctively nodded slightly, then quietly took a detour to the southern foothills. This forest is big and dense, and no one can be seen after taking 2 steps. Yan Rujin estimated the time. Watching the few people gathered together, they cautiously gathered tighter and tighter. She quietly lurked in front of them and found a moving boulder. With one hand supporting the boulder, she loudly said, From the Yan family, are you looking for me? After speaking, without hesitation, he pushed the already shaky boulder down the mountain. The boulder carried the broken stones and tumbled, causing 2 of them to scream in pain. And Yan Rujin saw this with a ghost face, so she ran around 3 times towards the mountaintop. The members of the Yan family are not willing to let Yan Rujin go, they don't hesitate to come forward and chase after her. Ah! A beast trap was evenly placed on Yan Lu's feet. Yan Rujin didn't forget to stop and turn around, looking at him sympathetically. It's really pitiful, why are you so careless? In one sentence, Yan Lu was so angry that he wanted to raise his sword and step forward, but he didn't want his other foot to step on a trap. Ah! Blood rushed out, causing him to roll on the ground in pain. Yan Rujin looked happily as she slowly walked forward. After all, the traps set by the villagers would leave marks in nearby places. Even after so many years in her past life, the days in this mountain have always been the source of support for her to endure and constantly recall. As she walked slowly, she also leisurely hummed a song. It's strange to say that they were all following the path she had walked, but along the way, 3 traps caught them and 2 fell into them, killing them. As Yan Lu was about to reach the mountaintop, he was supported by someone and the rest had already fallen on the road. Ahem. Coincidentally, at this moment, the fierce tiger lazily woke up from a flat boulder. This, to Yan Rujin's surprise, end of this chapter.